right, welcome to another episode of the Profit Minded Business Podcast, where we come together as a part of the business community to kind of share insights, avoid pitfalls, and just celebrate some successes. We always talk about here that, as business owners, we typically suffer silently in a lot of ways. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of responsibility. And so we come here to kind of talk through some of that stuff and hopefully learn from one another so that we have the iron sharpens iron type of a mentality. Today I'm joined with Shane Underwood of Think Green Pest Control and Jacob Andrews of iVue Media and Drones iVue. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Shane, we had a chance to talk a little bit before the podcast, and your story is pretty awesome. We're really glad to have you on here. Your experience goes back from being in IT and working with companies as large as like Oracle, and now you've migrated into running your own business and applying a lot of what you've learned to avoid pitfalls in what you're doing now. Start us off and just kind of give us your history and just a little bit about you and what you're all about.
All right, great, thanks. So back in 1996, I started working for Cracker Barrel Old Country Store in the IT department for them. I was in store support, where if stores had any technical issues with receipt or cash registers or server stands or grill printers, they'd call, we'd walk them through it. I kind of worked my way through several jobs there, ended up traveling for them through one of the regions for about 6 months, helping out swap over computer systems at the stores. Then went from there to a couple of startups in 2000 when everybody was in the big .com phase and everybody was hopping on the startups. The first one I went to was kind of lasted about 9 months, and so I had to leave that one as it was on a downhill slide. Went over to another small company but well-established company and got to know some people there. Got to be really close with one of the VP of sales, and my job there, he introduced me to the sales side of IT, which I immediately fell in love with because I got to eat really nice steak dinners and play golf a lot, which I really enjoyed at the time. So started
How old were you during that time period?
Oh, gosh, in the 90s, I was late 20s, mid to late 20s, so graduated high school, 89.
And that was early as far as computers and internet, so obviously you got in. What made you get into IT space and computers, and what drove that line?
So what got me into the IT space was it paid very well for part-time, for going to school, trying to go to college, and you could earn more per hour doing that than about anything else, and you could also study while you did it. It wasn't as much of a hands-on job. It was more talking people through things. So if you didn't have to touch your computer and you could walk them through solving an issue, then I could still study and do the IT work. I like the inside desk seemed a little more beneficial at the time for college studies.
Did you have as much of a vision as obviously we've come so far with technology? We were just talking about the mini SD cards being up to a terabyte in size now. I mean, technology has come so far from when the first computer came out.
Oh, it's grown. It's the computer. So like getting a MacBook Air now that has a solid state drive that, is larger than the computer I had back in the early 90s and with a spinning disk. And it's so much faster and easier, but I think it was Moore's law that IT or technology computing power doubles every 6 months or something.
Every 6 months?
Yeah.
Is it that big?
It might even be faster now. I mean,
because Intel and the processor, they were coming out with faster processors on average, 2 or 3 a year that were several times faster.
Yeah, it's crazy to see just even in my short time how much technology has changed throughout my life. But one thing that you brought up that was a lot of interest to me is your experience with the startup space. That's something I'm going through right now, and having your sort of insight from working in both the startup world and working for bigger companies like Oracle. What type of experiences did you have in each, and how were they different? How were they similar? And any insight that you can maybe provide?
Yeah, so I can give you some great insight on the one that was going downhill. So they actually had the #1 product in DOS when they did that. So just the program typing type, and then they wanted to go to the Windows world and have more of a Windows-based operating system. So they went from the #1 product to, when I joined them, there was a lot of hype around their new product they were going to release. Well, when we were having people come in to demo the product, I had to set it up in a way to hide about half the functionality because it wouldn't work.
Wow.
So it was almost like a smoke and mirror show when we would bring people in to demo, and I started getting really uncomfortable with the release dates. They were 2 years behind their original release date, but they don't tell you all that when you're interviewing. It was all hype, and we're going through the roof, and the stock's going to blow up, and we're going to do an IPO. And so all the big things that were happening back then, some of the businesses that happened to, but once I got in and saw that was not going to be the case, and how far behind and what we had to do just to demo and let customers touch the product and hide it, kind of gave me some great insight as to start looking for another position.
Now, you mentioned transitioning into another smaller startup style company. What do you think that they did right that maybe that first company didn't? You said they're a little bit more established.
It was a much more solid setup. So the CIO was the founder of the company and was very invested in having a rock solid product.
Right.
Where the other CIO that had started the other company was an attorney background and just kind of started this by happen chance and didn't really understand the IT, but knew he wanted to be part of .com. The CIO from the more established company had been in technology before, kind of spun this out of where he had worked and wanted to make it rock solid before he started releasing it. So it started on a much more solid base and was able to grow up from there.
Actually, it makes a lot of sense. You know, it's kind of like having a, I don't want to get into politics, but I was going to say, when you have attorneys, running something they don't know anything about, in this case, it was technology. And obviously having a CIO in there who understands how things connect, that had to have been the biggest difference.
Yeah, I think that's maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but what a lot of it comes down to is like that initial team and what they bring to the table, because that's something that I've started to realize more and more so that at the end of the day, everything comes from that original founding team or that original startup team, and then, it all builds from there. But if you don't have that solid team from the start, it's probably going to implode, in like 9 months. And
I think part of it was passion I think the attorney had a passion to own a business. I don't think he had a passion for what he was doing with that business, but he was an attorney, graduated from Vanderbilt, great guy. Yeah. And his dad had a mortgage loan servicing company, and he started the mortgage loan servicing software part of it and started to sell the software. So I think he had a passion to own his own business, but wasn't passionate about what it was doing. The other CIO that started that had a passion for technology. Not only did he come up with what we were selling there, which was emergency notification communication software, he also did Christmas lights and had blogs and forums, and they had to block out his neighborhood because there were so many people, because he timed the Christmas lights to play with music. He was one of the first people that started doing that, and they called him the grandfather of Christmas lights for that. But every year he took 2 weeks off at Thanksgiving to set it up, and I mean, his house was amazing. But he loved technology and what it was about, so I think that's why his did a lot better. And he brought business people in around him because he didn't want to worry about that. He wanted to play with the technology and be involved with that.
Were those business people like part of the original group, or did he already kind of get it established himself before you brought in those types of people, or was that really... He
became fairly established, but really quickly had some business people around him that he brought in. And one of them was the CEO when I was there. Had been with him since the beginning.
Okay.
And they grew it. When I was there, I think it was a $25 million business.
Wow.
So,
what kind of time frame was that? Like,
that was over about probably 10 to 15 years. They had launched a new product, and we're trying to get more in corporate communication side versus just emergency notification.
So with emergency notification, was that more like government facing, like part of?
We had a lot of government contracts and also a lot of civilian. So when 911 happened, we had a lot of their backup systems. So I ran the data center where the backup systems were, and it was placing calls to employees that were in the towers saying, press 1 if you've received this call and you are okay. So we had 100,000 calls that went out of our data center that month just trying to find people. So it was that type of emergency notification. If there was a train wreck, hospital would own this software to call all the doctors to see who could come in, who could be there, and so it was all kind of touch tone based at the time.
Yeah.
Now, was there also like a passion for like specifically the emergency communication system, or was he just overall like a technology
I think
enthusiast, and that was
grew
like,
out of it? I think he was into the automated response telephones, tying that into software. One of the large purchasers at the time was Comcast, prior to becoming Xfinity. So when you called in press 1 for, so that all that technology was what we were selling tied into the phone lines.
Yeah.
okay,
So it eventually all kind of became digital with the IP.
right?
But
Voice
at the
over
time,
IP.
it was like, it was pretty hardcore the way he wired a lot of that up to do that in the 90s prior to a lot of stuff we have now.
So Shane, how did you transition from IT and technology into pest control?
So it was not an easy transition, but had a partner that was running some lawn service companies. Decided to get into not pest control, but lawn service ourselves. And in 2010, had the opportunity to do that. So started the business in 2010, 0 customers. There were 3 of us, 3 partners that were involved. 2 of us were funding the business while the other third partner worked full time in it and grew it. And he was very, very good at what he did at growing lawn service businesses and operations management of that. So we funded that and grew it several years to 4 branches, over 7,500 customers. During that time, somewhere we decided to start the pest control business as well. So we started that. And then we, as the 3 partners, started having a few creative differences on the direction of growing the pest control. So since they had been in lawn service for so long, I decided to sell my part of lawn service to them and retain 100% of the pest control company. So that's how I ended up in pest control. But I've always had an entrepreneurial type mind, so I always knew I wanted to do something. When I was working for Oracle, I was a Platinum Marriott member. To get a Platinum Marriott member, you have to be gone 75 nights a year or more. And I have 3 boys at the time. They were getting into sports, and I was unable to commit to help coach, to help do anything else because I was gone all the time, and tried to figure out a way, how can I be there? How could I commit and spend more time with my kids? And the entrepreneurial avenue helped do that a lot more. So now I'm on the South Forsyth High School football touchdown club. I'm on the tip-off club. Help run a youth basketball organization. So I'm allowed to be a lot more involved with my children now. And I get about 2 Marriott nights a year instead of
75.
80, 85.
That's amazing. So when you, I think when we started talking earlier, transition from Oracle to the lawn business was you were primarily part of that. You were one of the funding partners.
Correct.
And so you didn't really say, oh, I want to get into lawn service, but you were really saying, I need a better way of doing things. I need to, for my family, for my kids, for my wife.
Want a new lifestyle.
Yes.
Yeah, you wanted to change. So that's a big transition. So if someone was listening right now and was struggling with traveling, I know a lot of my people I talk to, they don't like the travel part of what they're doing. They have a hard time making that transition. What was some of your process that you went through to figure out where you wanted to be, or how you landed on, I'm going to be a silent partner or a funding partner of the lawn service?
It's a lot of conversations. So in traveling and throughout what I was doing at the time, and when you travel, I mean, if you're at a hotel, you get done, it's 8:30 at night, you're not ready to go to bed. You may go down the bar, have a drink, and strike up a conversation with somebody else that's traveling away from their family. Right. So got to meet a lot of people. You find people that if you stay in touch with are really, really good at what they do. Mm-hmm. And so I always would have conversations with people about entrepreneurial. Have you ever thought about doing this on your own? The partner we started the lawn service with happened to be my brother-in-law. So I'd known him. He was one of my best friends in high school. So there was already a relationship there, but I still talked to everybody when I was out traveling, trying to figure out if I could ever start something on my own, because it's really hard to start just a software company from scratch. Yeah. And that's what I was involved in. But just figuring out some businesses. I've had some friends of mine that have also went the franchise route. That worked in large marketing firms, large corporate environments, kind of the same thing. We're tired of traveling started looking at franchises and ended up buying some franchises, and that's worked out very positive for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could, and this is something that I've had conversations with many people about, where most people think being an entrepreneur, especially nowadays, is a young man's game. Like, oh, I've already established, I have a family, I can't make that leap of faith to, live the life I want to live. But you're clearly an example that, you can be, well established, have a career, have a family, and still make that transition if you want it enough. Can you maybe talk about that from your experience? Because I've talked about it before where I was in school. I didn't really have a whole lot to give up, to be able to do what I want to do with my life. But, someone where you have a family to feed and, a lot more expenses than someone, who's just getting started with their career has. So what was that like?
Yeah, so it was tough. You need a strong relationship, which my wife is very understanding, and we had many conversations on Oracle was a very good job, had great benefits, it paid very well. That was going to be tough to walk away from that. And so part of being a silent funding partner in the beginning helped because we could see the growth, we could see predicting the future at what point could each partner start to leave their job that was funding it and go full time into this. So we did see a pathway in that and still got to hang on to my Oracle job and slowly transition into that. So again, finding somebody that's really good at something, if you have a good job and you can fund them until it grows large enough, we could also take a risk and start funding something and then see if it worked. If it didn't, then sell your part and move on. So I think that helped, and just being the funding, it would be much more difficult to take a leap of faith, to leave your job, start from scratch, and you be that person doing everything.
The sole owner, operator, and the funder.
Right.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, though, that not a lot of people realize. It's not all of a sudden necessarily that leap of faith that you have to make, where most people think, oh, yeah, if I want to get started with my business, I have to go all in. But there is opportunities where you have a 9-to-5 job, and even if you don't have the luxury of being able to just contribute financially, I mean, there's still hours after, the day that, we're in the age of the internet now, where you can do business primarily from your phone, from your computer, where, maybe 20 years ago that wasn't really a possibility. But, when you got started with your business, I mean, that was already pretty well established. And I think it's just an interesting perspective that most people don't get to hear, that it's not really all in or nothing, that there's some gray room in between there, and that you can slowly kind of work into, being a full-time partner of the business without going from no time to full-time, just like that.
Yeah, and I think it helps sometimes as well. So when I first came into it, I actually made less money going into the entrepreneurial stage, because there's some things you don't count on, like you're getting to pay all of your Medicare and FICA. And so, making X amount in the corporate world and making X amount as an entrepreneur is not the same money you're bringing home. So took a pay cut to do that. And I think jumping in with a little more risk involved, maybe a little sooner than you might, because if somebody else is paying you, you're going to be comfortable. You're not maybe going to push yourself as hard as in your business. But if you jump in and now it's all you have to do it. If you're going to, the hunger helps to have some of that. So that I would say jumping in, don't wait till you're going to be very comfortable, because it may not grow as fast as it could
or that may never happen.
Yeah.
Right. Tell us a little bit about your process for evaluating the financial end of how you run your business now. We talked a lot about your CPA relationship, and you have a good banking relationship. But from a standpoint of understanding cash flow and being able to forecast, what have you been doing for that, and how is that? Have you been able to kind of monitor how?
So a lot of it was the software package that we got that's geared towards pest control companies. The one we had at the lawn service was very, very old software package. It had good reporting in it. It was very useful. But the software package I went for with pest control is 7 years old. So it's much more up to date. It gives me great insights. There's a whole dashboard every time I log in where I can see all the reports. You can choose kind of, if you think of it as a widget-based dashboard,
Yeah.
I can pick my widget. So when I open it up, I can see what's my revenue going to be for the next week, 2 weeks, what's my revenue been for the past 6 months, see the trends, where it's going. So it's very nice. It's the hardest thing, I guess, in a service-based business is predicting all the channels of where your customers are going to come from, and that being very consistent. So you can predict customers coming in, and I can predict a number, but the individual channels work at different times of the year. So that's been the toughest thing for me to figure out is what time of year am I going to get from this channel versus this channel, and some work well during parts of the year and others.
I imagine that once you figure out that seasonality of them, you'll actually be able to apply an
Be
ad
easier to
spend.
budget, yeah.
Yeah, you'll spend more here on during certain months, and that would be.
And something else that Corbin and I have briefly talked about, and some with our other guest, is your ideal customer. And we had a chance to talk about this before the podcast, where it seems like you have a very good idea of who your ideal customer is. And I think that's a problem that a lot of business owners struggle with, and me as well. I hate to say no to opportunity, right? But it may be more trouble than what it's worth, even though they're a paying customer. Over the course of the long run, they might not be an ideal fit for you and your services. Could you talk a little bit of how you were able to kind of traverse that?
Yeah,
hardship?
and it's kind of where it started was going some best client workshops and some stuff that I've done through PowerCore, and it really helped you hone in. Even at Oracle, we would go in a room and have a meeting with 30 DBAs, and within 5-10 minutes I could tell you the 5 people in that room that did all the work, and the 25 that you could probably let go and still get the same amount of work done. So it's funny how that's transitioned over into kind of the home service business as well. I can talk to a customer and within 5-10 minutes know if they're going to be a good customer or if they're going to consume all my time and be the lowest profit margin customer that I have, that I'm putting all of my work towards. So it's the conversation that they want to have. For me, if they are purely focused on price and don't ask any other questions, and I talk to them about the level of service that we bring to the table, what we're going to do for them. If they don't want to continue that conversation at all and want to focus everything on the price and want to get you down to the lowest dollar or penny possible, then I've had to tell people before, I don't think this is going to work out for us. I really appreciate your time and me coming to your house and being able to talk to you. And that has surprised some of them and caught them a little bit off guard. But we've won jobs before where we were the highest company. Out of the 3 bids, we were the highest by 15%, and they still chose us because of what we were able to explain to them, what we were going to do. We draw graphs. We tell them, this is an issue over here. This is what we're going to do to resolve that issue. So we let them know exactly our plan of attack. And when they ask for a smaller price, most of the time I'm like, this is my best price. If you want this quality of service, then this is what I have to charge you. If you don't want to pay that much, that's fine. You have some other quotes, feel free to go with them.
Right.
So usually when that situation, they end up being a great customer because we go out and we have to deliver on what we've told them we're going to do, and we have to do that. And as long as we're doing that, then they're very comfortable with the price they're paying because they feel like they're getting the best service for that.
Sure. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's something, I've still learning, of course. I'm still at the very early point in, starting and operating my business, and I've gotten better at it. But starting off, I would just say yes to everything, even though it's not what I really valued our level of service at. And then I've started to realize a lot of the times where the customer that does want the lowest possible price also wants the highest possible service, and they end up being a more difficult customer than say an example I like to use quite often, especially as it relates to video production. If you're going to sell a video to a company like Coca-Cola, they're always going to go with a $50,000 video instead of a $5,000 video. And they're going to probably be a customer that doesn't expect less, but they're going to be easier to work with than say a customer that wants that same quality video for $500. You know, they're going to want even more out of it, even though, you know, it's a comparable level of quality.
They're not going to pay you for 90 days.
Right. Right.
So,
or at all.
Cash flows right.
Yeah. So
There's trade-offs.
Yeah. How have you been able to like work on that and implement that in your business? I know you just talked about like the workshops that's helped you identify those, but are there any problems that you faced in the real world that maybe you could share some insight on of how you were able to work through those? Or
So some of the issues are, I guess, getting people to pay in a home service business. That's always a difficult thing. So again, since we use a newer software that's only 7 years old, my favorite thing to do is every couple of weeks I'll go through and look at, 15 days out or more since we've been paid, and I can text that whole group. Hit one button and it sends a text. It has their balance on it and a link to the customer portal, and it will automatically log them in from there. So technology has been great because the lawn service, we did not have the capability to do that. We usually had someone come in, print a list, have them call off the list, try to talk to people. If that didn't work, we didn't get someone, then we would try to email, and I can pull up my whole list of late, and in one step I can text them, send them an email, and send a paper invoice through the mail form as well.
wow.
So the technology has helped in that aspect in collections, but I guess the most difficult thing that I found is finding channels for customers, finding new channels. I've had a lot of advice. One guy's been in pest control for 40 years, gave me some great advice. He goes, it may take 1,000 different channels, but if you get one customer off each channel, you have 1,000 customers. And he's like, you're doing that. Another great guy that owns a business in Cumming, his name's Derek Brooks, had told me, he goes, wherever there was someone in this city, wherever there's an event with more than 30 people in seats, I want to be there. And so what I figured out as an entrepreneur is it is your business. You are the face of it. People will buy from people they trust. In order to trust me, they have to know me. They have to meet me. So I do try to be a part of my Rotary, be a very strong presence in the Rotary. I've been there for a year, and I feel like I'm kind of gaining ground in there. And some of the referral networks have worked out very well. But it is, my son plays football. Join the board, get on the board. You meet a lot of new people from doing that. I get to meet all the football parents now. So there's ways that you can get out in your community, and I care about the community as well, which helps a lot in helping me want to be out there. But if you're going to have a small business and you're the owner, and get out there and meet people.
Right.
Is that a problem that you ever ran into in the startup community? And I probably talked way too much about this, but it's a problem I run into with a lot of people in the startup and tech community now, is they are so product focused, where that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if they're a one-man team or a small team where they're all product oriented and they're not getting out there, they can have the best product in the world, but if you can't sell it, if you can't market it, it really means nothing. Because the example I like to use to make it more relatable to people is, you probably don't know the best musician in the world out there because they're not well marketed, and they're just so focused on music that they don't put themselves out there. And that's, I think, a pitfall that a lot of business owners fall into is, you just need to get out there. You can figure out what problems people have. And even if you don't have the ideal solution or ideal product or service for them, you can build and improve that over time as you're building a relationship with them. And, as long as you're open with communication, even if you do mess up, but you're just upfront, hey, this is a problem that we've had. This is what we've done to rectify it, and this is how we're going to ensure it never happens. People are a lot more receptive to that than, hey, we're still building out a product. It won't be ready for another year because we're trying to make it perfect, and not even going out to test the market. Again, so is that something that you ever saw in the startup world? Or?
Yeah, the startup world was a little different because it was a race to get everything out.
Right.
So if you were behind in the race, that hurt a lot. And that's the one company was very, very behind in the race to have a Windows-based solution for that. And I think that even though, it's a great example of they had the number one base DOS system, and probably 3 years after I left them in the early 2000s, they had been acquired by a bank, and the bank thought they could hurry it along, or I'm not sure the bank knew exactly how far behind they were in the process when they bought them. But 2 years after the bank bought them, they walked in and escorted the CEO out.
Wow.
And everybody but like the support people. All the developers, I mean, they completely shut it down. So.
Just a waste.
So you talked a little bit about how like technology is used like on the financial operations side of your business, but like on site, how has technology changed since, you know, even though you haven't been involved in the pest control side of the business, as long as you have the other parts like the lawn service, how has technology changed and helped you on site over time? Even though I know you're more like natural solutions, which I think is great, but I imagine there's some sort of technology involved that has helped.
Yeah, so the technology, I guess insecticides are ever evolving, and how they're called modes of action that the insecticide will take care of an insect. That's ever evolving. There's new coming out all the time. The EPA regulates it so well that something that may work really well will be taken off the market because they find that, 10 years after it's been in use, it may have some side effects or something, or, something they don't like. So they'll take it off the market. So it's always ever evolving technology wise. The big thing for me is again, I'll go back to the software packages with the lawn service. When we had someone go out on route, all their invoices were pre-printed. So there's a paper cost to that. They would go out. If somebody didn't want service, they'd bring the invoice back. We had to scan it back in, shred it. So that, there's another paper cost gone there. And it wasn't very agile in how you could move with it. Now we can go out. We have iPads. They complete the service. They check in at the stop on their iPad. So I can go in at any point in time on my phone through my laptop and see where my guys are in their routes. I can see what stop they're on throughout the day on the route that they have assigned. Once they complete that, an hour after they complete the service, an email goes, and they have it's delayed by an hour in case they forgot something, need to go back and change it. They can change it before it goes back out. And so they get a completed service email. So we don't even use paper anymore. It's helped us to go completely paperless. They can also, if they're doing the service and they see something that is a concern for the homeowner, so water buildup from the condensation unit on the AC, which could cause mosquito breeding areas, then we can take a photo of that and immediately upload it to the portal and put a note with it saying, hey, you may want to do something about this. It's on the left side of your house. So the communication we have with the customer, we put everything at their fingertips through a customer portal without having to rely on paper. We can take a Google overhead view of their house and point out and circle little spots around the house where there's concerns that they may want to look at. So technology has evolved in the communication with the customer and how we do our job, and it's much faster for them. They don't have to write all the notes. So after the lawn service, since it's paper-based, it's a carbonless piece of paper. It folds over, and they write all their notes on the piece of paper, tear off part of it. We get part of it coming back to the office, and they would give the other part to the customer. Well, we can pre-type a lot of notes in the pest system. So once they are done, they can say, they go through, they electronically choose the product, how much they put down. They can take notes as long as everything was a normal stop and there's nothing different. Then they just choose the basic notes, and those go in. If there was something different, then they type on an iPad what they saw different and then submit that. So it's drastically helped us on route building because they're not at a stop as long as they used to be.
So Shane, see, that to me is like, oh yeah, it's just makes total sense. It's the way things should be done today. But I would wager that you're ahead of your industry. Is the rest of your competitors, are they as advanced as you are?
I really can't answer for my competitors and how they do things. We have had conversations where we've gotten several customers that already had pest control service, and when we talk to them about what we do, they take a deep breath and go, wow, that just seems a lot easier. So I'm not sure that what the competition is doing exactly, but I know a lot of people are very happy with what we do. A lot of people don't want the paper invoices. Kind of with the lawn part of it was we hang the invoice on the front door. You're really not supposed to put anything in the mailbox. Kind of postal codes. So a lot of people don't use their front doors. They use garage doors. They go in. You can't hang it on the inside door going to their house if their garage doors are closed.
Right.
So they may not see it. So when we call them and say, hey, why haven't you paid? And they're like, well, I didn't know anybody was here. And it's still hanging on the front door, or the wind blew it off, and it's 4 neighbors down. So the email, a lot of people are very happy with that. We can still print you a paper invoice if you want that. We can mail it out. We do that for some people because in the beginning, new customers, the email may go to spam. We try to tell them, hey, make sure that this email address, but not everybody understands how to allow emails to come through.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of, because the home service industry is that a lot of the folks who are managing the businesses, they don't have a technology background, so they're just not comfortable or used to it. I've got several clients that is just very limited in even their web presence, and it's like they just have had so much business of word of mouth that it hasn't really mattered all that much. But we're moving into a time period where it's so critical to make these adjustments, and so it's just to hear your story about your background in technology. It just makes perfect sense that you'd be running a company that was very efficient from a technology standpoint. Do you have any suggestions for maybe a business owner who is in the home service arena that hasn't made those decisions, and maybe you could just say, I don't know, I don't even know what to ask of what to share with them, but I just know there's some value there for them to understand. How do they go about doing that?
So it's a lot of people have a great fear of doing that just because they're afraid of what's going to happen going from the old system to the new system. So to update, there's a lot of the antiquated systems, the way it stores information, how it looks is very difficult to get that up into a new system is the belief, but it's really quite simple. If you can print a report into an Excel spreadsheet, a customer report, then they can pull almost anything. You'd be amazed at the newer technology companies understood that was going to be a big issue and a large hurdle to overcome. So they've gotten very efficient at taking information in the way the old systems put it out and ingesting that into the new system and making it fairly seamless to start that process. But a lot of old timer people that have been in the business fear change. They don't want to do something different. They have this technology package because it's what they know, and they would be very uncomfortable with trying to learn a new technology package. A great example is, a long time ago when I was with Cracker Barrel and we had to go out and when we changed out the new systems, I had 4 teams that did that in the Northeast. So I traveled and would spend 2 weeks at a time with each team and work with them. And I was at one team and they were training the managers from the store, which a restaurant manager may not be a great technology person. They could care less. They want to make sure, is the food coming out on time? Is everything happening in the restaurant that it should? And there was one manager that sat down in front of the computer and froze and broke out in a cold sweat. And because technology, he was having to learn a new technology and he was scared to death that he would lose his job because he wouldn't know what he was doing. And he had that big of a fear. We talked to him for 15, 20 minutes to get him calmed down enough to where he would want to try something on the new technology. So it's a lot of it could be change, and you just have to overcome that. And there's risk involved in small business every day, but you got to weigh the risk reward.
Do you think that someone like that could maybe migrate in pieces, or is it something that you would recommend they just really do the homework to evaluate the different software packages that are available? Maybe even talk about how you go about evaluating software packages. Do you have some sort of a mindset around or a process around doing that?
I did. I received several demos from different ones. There's one pest control software company that's like the massive company. They have everybody, but they are also older, and everything you did with them was an add-on. So you got the core package, and then if you wanted this, it's extra. This is extra. This is extra. But we found a couple of the newer companies that to get customers, everything's included. Everything they do, every update, every new piece is included, and it's great that it's a hosted system, so I can get to it from my phone, from a tablet, from an internet cafe. If I don't have my laptop and I need to pull in and do something really quick, there's ways to get to the hosted systems, where the antiquated systems, a lot of times you have to be on site, or if you have to have a remote desktop solution. But coming from a technology background, I knew I wanted something built on a newer platform. So for me, it was very interesting, because a lot of my conversations with the software vendors, I did not let them know of my technology background. I wanted to kind of get an overview, and then I would start asking a little deeper and deeper questions, and a lot of them would stop and be like, hey, wow. So have you done anything technology? And I was like, well, yeah, I worked for Oracle for a long time and some other technology companies. And they were like, oh. But then that opened up a whole new conversation, because they were like, oh, so I can explain this to you.
I could talk
and I'm like, yes, yeah, that's, we can go to that level. And so it was some great conversations that I got to have. But finding, I would say, do the demos. Find something that you look at, you feel comfortable with, and think, that would be an easy transition for what I'm doing.
And you were talking about, you wanted a service that was in the cloud, basically. I've even had conversations where there's some concern around cloud-based technology, where all my information's out there for someone to hack or to get a hold of, or for that matter, for it to be lost. If something were to happen, I'd like it to be where I know I can touch it, feel it, or it's on my desktop, or I have control over it in my backup system. Talk about the security around having a system in the cloud, and somebody who's concerned but maybe shouldn't be.
Normally, large software companies that are hosting it put a lot of money into their data center setups to make sure that doesn't happen. So if you take credit cards as a small business and you're doing it on site, and you try to do all the payment processing through you, or store the numbers on your system that's on site, there's a whole PCI compliance that you have to go through and you have to meet. But if all that's done at my vendor, then my vendor has to go through that process. My vendor has to make sure that's kept up with. But I would ask those questions. How often is my data backed up? Is it stored on site? Is it stored off site? So there's a lot of questions that I wanted answered in that, because I knew if I was backing up my data, where it would be and where I would have it. But if I felt comfortable enough with theirs, because that's their livelihood, their business depends on, do I have this customer's information protected? If they don't, then they could lose their whole business very, very quickly. So you have to ask. I did want to know, with all the companies I talked to, their strategy and backups and redundancy. And do you have your all-in-one data center? Do you run dual data centers? So if one goes down, if a tornado hits this one, is this one still going to be up? Are they more than 100 miles apart so the same tornado doesn't catch them? Because they were in Texas, and Texas is great, but they're near Tornado Alley, so weather is a hurricane can make it through Texas coming off the Gulf. So there are a lot of questions that you do want to ask, and you do want to be comfortable.
Let's run through this, because I think that if there's one thing that someone takes away from this, and hopefully someone's taking notes, so it's to make sure that you go ahead and kind of list them off. I mean, go through them, because I think that what you were just saying, you were going through it so fast that because you know what you're talking about, it wasn't as clear about what I should actually say to the salesperson.
So is the data contained in more than one area is the main thing. So most hosting companies will use a data center. Are they using more than one? And if they are using more than one, are they more than 100 miles apart? Is it usually
geographically, you want them in different locations? Obviously, the hurricane
weather effects.
Texas, then the storage facility that was in, let's say New York or Maine is totally not affected.
Yeah, I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have about like cloud storage. At the end of the day, it's still hosted somewhere. There's still a data center and servers.
There's a computer somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, even if it's hosted locally and you want to process the credit cards and go through the PCI, is it PCI or PCIe or something like that?
PCI is the payment card industry.
Okay.
Compliance, PCI compliance.
And if you go through that compliance and you host it all locally on your own computers, it's still hackable. And that's the thing. Any technology right now is hackable, but it's just, again, how much trust you hold in the larger corporations that do have the money to actually put in security systems, where if you're doing it locally, it may seem more secure because it's under your control, but chances are you don't have the same resources and the same incentive to make it as secure as it. what Shane said, their livelihood is behind making sure your data is protected.
Yeah. So a good example is a firewall trying to keep people out. They're going to probably have a $50,000 to $100,000 system in place to do that. Where for me, that $1,000 system would be a good stretch to try to do that. So,
right. So we know we want it redundant, and we know we want to make sure they have certain security protocols in place. And maybe that's the
backup strategy is very good. So there's on-site and off-site backup. So do they run it to tape? A lot of that's kind of the old style of doing it. It's running it to tape and storing the tapes off-site. Now it's just they will usually have data storage in 3 different places, and they will just if I change something here, then it gets copied to the other 2. So as information's changing, there's one central location, but it's sending those changes and that replication offsite to different data centers or data storage facilities as well.
And therefore, if one system has a blackout problem, fails, gets washed away in a flood,
the other one
you've got 2
kicks
others.
on, takes over.
Okay, so you got security, you've got the redundancy as far as locations, and then you have the backup process.
Mm-hmm. How often is a big one, because how much am I going to lose a week? If I go down tomorrow, if the system goes down and you go to restore it, am I losing an hour? Am I losing a day? Because that's pretty big. If it depends on your revenue, but on a daily revenue, if you're doing as a small business owner $6,000 a day and you lose a day, what do you have to do to get that day back? You have to go re-enter all the so you want it down to the closest point in time as possible. So in running backups, you can restore to a point in time. You can have a day. So that's good critical information to know as well.
So the question there is how quickly is everything being backed up?
What point in time do you restore to?
What point in time do you want to restore to? Okay.
No, I want to go back a little bit to our conversation when you were talking about the team and having a home service business. There's probably certain qualities that you look for in new hires, and I think that's someone for running a small business. It's a big first step to start bringing in new people where you're not on every job site yourself.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about what you look for, the processes and training and everything that goes involved to building a team?
So people skills are a big one in home service business, especially lawn was a little different than pest. Lawn, we stayed in the yard. Pest control, a lot of times we go inside the house. So the trust factor between the customer and the people we hire has to be big. So they have to have really good people skills. If I sit down and somebody stumbles through an interview or feels uncomfortable talking to me, is it going to be this way? Are they actually going to go knock on somebody's door, or do they have a fear of talking to people and will avoid people? So personality, people skills. The second one, we can teach them everything we need to, but I can't re-raise people. So if they're never on time, I can take a very eager person that is willing to do what I need them to do, shows up on time, answers texts, communicates well. But if they don't have that, I can't re-raise them at a point in their life. They're old enough that they're not going to change that habit. That's a bad habit. They might be the smartest pest control technician in the world, but if I can't get them to work and I can't get them to do the correct things, then it's not going to work out for us.
That's funny that you mentioned that. That's almost verbatim, conversations I've had with people where, not to say that it's not a skill that you can teach, but it is ingrained from a very young age, that attitude that a person has. And but the skills, the actual hands-on work, you can train someone how to do that in a much quicker time than you can change their whole attitude and outlook on life that translates into your business. And that's the way that they're going to represent you at the end of the day. And
I think it's the soft skills, the people skills. It's I think we went from they call it helicopter parents, that they hovered around their kids to make sure nothing bad happened, and now they're calling them lawnmower parents, where they wipe everything out of the way in front of the child so they never have to worry about resolving a conflict because they mowed all the conflicts down before the child came to it. So
I like that.
Problem solving is, a big thing. Can you solve a problem? Have you ever had to solve a problem? We try with our kids to let them make bad choices and see what happens out of that. I mean, we don't want them to, and that, can cause some stress in the house, and knowing your child's going to, but it's like, let's see how they handle it. Because if they don't, it's better to teach them while they're here how to handle situations than take every situation out and they get out in the real world and go on a job interview and not know what to do. So simple problem solving skills are hard to find. Common sense is, I guess, what it used to be called, but now it's soft skills and all that. But it's interesting in some conversations you have with some people that have issues. Can't talk to me because they're looking at their phone. That's another one that drives me nuts. So just small things that we look for. And if I get somebody that's eager, excited to be in the interview and ask a few questions, they can walk through it and get through it, and it's a pleasant conversation, then I can train them.
Right.
Train to do.
Where are you finding people now? Like, where are you putting out your job postings?
I try to get a lot of it through other employees. Is there anybody you've ever worked with that you really enjoyed, that did really good at their position, and kind of contact them, reach out to them. A lot of times they may not want to leave. If you're with a large established company, again, even if you're not the entrepreneur, if you're just a worker there, it's hard to leave something that's really well, because there's risk in going to a small company as well. So,
and it's changed, you know.
Yeah, but a lot of it's Indeed. I think a lot of people go through Indeed. There's some Facebook groups that are technicians only. There's some that are owners only. Getting involved with those groups, kind of filtering through, seeing someone in your area, and then you can reach out to them and a private message, be like, I can tell you are passionate about your job and you like it, or you looking, or so there's different ways. Again, it takes effort to find
different channels, like you said.
Channels. It's all about the channels for everything: people, revenue, customers.
That's great.
I like that.
Yeah.
But, so Corbin, if you want to maybe do the one question that we like to ask our guest.
Well, we kind of mentioned that is there really was one thing that you felt like really helps you make the right decision? I feel like hearing your story that you have come from a lot of problems and challenges, and you've learned and you've grown from them, and you've made good choices. And I didn't hear any major pitfalls along the way. It was just a series of choices. But is there something that you would teach, let's say your son, I know the oldest is 16 now, but if he was following your footsteps, what would you want to tell him today to maybe help him avoid something that can be avoided?
So I'd say the best thing is, if you're passionate about something and you want to pursue that as an entrepreneurial career, as a business, find someone really good in that field and offer to buy them lunch, offer to buy them breakfast, and spend an hour and a half with them. Yeah. And out of that conversation, if they're willing to spend more time with you, do that. I was able to talk to a gentleman that had been in the pest control industry for 40 years, and incredible advice, and I got to just ask him a lot of questions, got some great advice from him on that. Even before we started the pest control, I would go to Charlotte, North Carolina, where we had one of our branches, and I found some pest control owners in Charlotte that I would go up once a month and try to have lunch with them. Went out on a route all day with one of their guys one time to see how they did it. But if you're passionate about something, you do want to start learn it. Learn everything you can about it from anybody that's willing to talk to you, but find someone that does it really well and try to get them, sit down, bug them.
Yeah.
And if I can add on to that, that's, I've been blessed to have many people like that within the industries, but even look outside of your industries, people just successful in any walks of life, or that you define to be successful, and learn from them. And oftentimes, even though it may not be a translatable skill or process, because it's a different industry or different business that they've had experience with, a lot of times you can, relate it back to your business just by the trait or the attitude that they have. And a lot of that, I think, does come down to passion at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. I've never seen someone that I think to be successful that doesn't have a passion for life, not just their business, but, they wake up every day. Great, it's another day. I'm happy to be here. I get to do what I want to do.
Right.
But
that's good. Well, thank you guys for joining us. I know it's been a great episode. Shane, appreciate your time out.
Thank you for having me. That was great.
Definitely. And we'd like to have you back another time. There's just so much more I can imagine we could talk about. And Jacob, man, awesome. We're always glad to have you here. And thank you so much again for hosting and doing the production for us. We've got Caitlin behind the cameras here, and it really means a lot to be able to be a part of this and to have it visual and yet at the same time audio. So if anyone is looking to do something similar to this, Jacob is a great resource. Feel free to reach out to him. And Jacob, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can go to iVue Media, search that on Google, YouTube, Facebook, any social media platforms, or just go straight to our website at www.ivue.media. But
Yeah.
Shane, likewise, where can people reach out to you? Who are the people that you would like to reach out to you? And just let them know where you can be.
Yeah, we're residential, commercial. We're in the Cumming area and kind of branch out from there, go from Canton over to Loganville and from Dawsonville down to Roswell. If you think about the 4 1/4, our website is a great resource for people to get in touch with us at tgpest.com. They're always, we love to talk to people on the phone and have that personal conversation. Our phone number is 470-297-5972. Also our Facebook. We have a lot of people reach out to us through Facebook as well, TG Pest. So.
Nice. And, being that your name has green behind it, I asked you if you had green products, and a big part of what you do is something.
Yeah, we have a lot of all-natural products that we can use. And like I told you, the one farm up in Dawsonville, they're an organic farm. They're not allowed to have any pesticide anywhere on the farm. It takes several years to be certified organic, so the house is very close to the farm. So they use the all-natural pesticide and absolutely love it. And talked to her the other day, and she was recommending me to some other people that she knows in organic. We have some customers that just want the all natural on the inside of the home and regular pest control on the outside. We're able to work with people and explain to them the differences, the positive and negatives of both sides of it. So
That's great. Well, I knew that would be important to share with some of the listeners. And of course, my name is Corbin Cook, and I'm with S&B Strategy Consultants and Auxilium Associates. And my role as a fractional CFO is to make sure business owners can have visibility into their future for forecasting cash flow, but also making decisions on that information. Oftentimes it's nice to have that proactive voice with you, making some choices based on what we're seeing. So we're thankful that all of you joined us here for the episode. Of course, Profit Minded Business, you can find us at profitmindedbusiness.com as well as our YouTube channel. And you can find us now in some of the podcast audio files. So thanks again so much, guys. Have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you soon.
great, thank you.